No safe place to put water up here. I apologize. Can you hear me? Yes? I apologize if I have to take a couple looks at my notes. I was asked to fill in for one of the keynote speakers last minute, and so my presentation was put together in the interim. My name is Madison Hampton. I'm the founder of Safe House Training Solutions. Hold on. Oh, I got mine. Got it. Founder of Safe House Training Solutions. And after a decade of a wide spectrum of preparation, training, and things like that, through the military, through working with the fire department, working on an ambulance, working in private security, working in drug interdiction, and training across the entire country, I have gathered enough information to build a company and provide these trainings for civilian use, essentially. So education and the education conference, how does that fit in with you guys? How does that fit in with education? Good question. The Education 2.0 conference reached out to me because I'm in education in providing those trainings to other people. So I say all this not to give you a small resume of my experience or what have you, but to provide for you the understanding of why I'm speaking to you and essentially answering the question, why should I listen to this guy, right? All right. Many of those positions that I mentioned earlier in the military and so on and so forth have been held at the same time. So I really have about 10, 15, maybe even 20 years packed down into a 10-year interim or about 12-year interim. When I created the title, Safety Preparation, I have a safety training and preparation within our schools, I wanted to cover some safety issues, but I want to first define what I'm not talking about. What I'm not talking about is bubble wrapping our PE equipment and our playground equipment, right? What I'm not talking about is the ergonomics of our desks for our students and things like that. And what I'm also not talking about is the intricacies of a broad spectrum issue like bullying and other assaults. Over the last day and a half, we've all discussed both on stage amongst ourselves at the conference and the learning environment and methods in which our youth learn. We've seen many problems and propositions for solutions to enhance the learning of the world's youth. I've enjoyed the ideas thus far. There's, however, one problem that exists regardless of what we do with the training environment and institutions of education. There's always a potential for violence and traumatic injury. I call them low-frequency, high-acuity events. They don't happen often, but they do require a higher level of education, training, and equipment than most events that happen on a day-to-day basis within our schools. I apologize, I'm trying to figure out the this thing. Play. Green triangle. I got the laser. This one? Okay, was that me or was that you? Try one more? Okay, cool. All right, high acuity events require a greater degree of action and observation and intervention. All right. It is true that over the last decade, we've seen a decrease in reported violent acts within our schools. These are reports from the students to the Board of Education. It is also true that we've seen an increase in hardware like security cameras, metal detectors. My wife is an educator. She's here present. And the school actually purchased a tub, a 5-gallon bucket. And in that 5-gallon bucket, it's got a bunch of equipment. And they put it in the classroom for any lockdown procedures and things like that. When she got this bucket, she came home and she said, "Honey, they finally gave us some safety and preparatory equipment and stuff like that." I said, "What is it?" She goes, "5-gallon bucket." So what's inside? She goes, "I don't know." What do you mean you don't know? That's kind of essential in providing the equipment, right? So it sounds cool, but when I asked her and she didn't know, it was discouraging. We went from encouragement to discouragement about how they were treating the safety of that scenario. So after perhaps the first iconic attack in our schools in 1999, the Columbine shooting, followed several others, and educators and administrators feverishly worked for solutions. Active shooter response training sprang out of the FBI and later on the Department of Homeland Security. And these were pushed out to schools, they were pushed out to churches, they were pushed out to the community. And schools and local police departments began to work together a little bit. They created protocols and they created training events and things like that. And the issue that I have with that is it went so far and then stopped. Again, I'm going to reflect back on my community in California, in the Central Valley. And we have my wife's school. I lean heavily on that, obviously, because that's my backyard, right? That school district has protocol, but no training. That community has no training. That police department trains, but only with the police department. They don't include the schools, and they infrequently include the fire department, the local fire department, who would be working alongside of them in that situation. So with these low frequency, high acuity events, we now have the teachers that are unequipped, and the circumstance could easily get out of hand on campus, right? There's also no hands-on training. So even if they did have a computer-based training or a lecture training, speakers was talking about this the other day. They said that, no, it was this morning, I take that back. This morning, someone said, "I've provided trainings for 2 days and they did great, and then they forgot it all." That's exactly what happens if you don't provide a multisensory approach. All right, so I have a graph showing the decrease in violent acts in our schools. This is from the, let's see, of course the monitor doesn't go that low, the Board of Education. And you could see clearly from 1999 to 2019 a clear decrease in violent acts within our schools. Here you see an increase in violent acts and fatalities in our school shootings and things like that. So while we have a decrease in violence, we have an increase in the fatality of those violent acts when they do occur. And another graph, another graph here showing school shootings increasing, essentially, right? Any of this material that you're curious about, if you'd like it, I can provide it for you afterwards. I don't have like a sheet to hand out, but I can provide it via email. Now, like I've said, we have a decrease in non-fatal victimization. However, we have seen an increase in high acuity situations and fatalities within those violent acts when they occur. Again, I go back to the statement of these low frequency, high acuity events and how they create critical victims, and they oftentimes need treatment immediately. So we're faced with a conundrum. We could sit here and watch someone bleed out. We can sit here and wonder what we should do while EMS and fire is staging half a mile away, While law enforcement is sweeping the halls, school campuses can be very, very large and take a very, very long time to clear the threat. So while this is happening, while we have a high acuity event, while you're sheltering in place or what have you in these schools, and while our victims are in the halls bleeding out, we may be too late. Another high frequency event, high acuity event is any medical condition that a student may have on campus. I know I'm marrying two bummer concepts together, right? But we have two distinct low frequency, high acuity events that are both very, very important. So on the medical side, we have an increase in, and I don't have slides for this, I'm going off script a bit. We have an increase in allergic reactions, the need for epinephrine and EpiPens and things like that, sudden cardiac events and things like that. And with a majority of our training going towards teachers that are entering into the career field, we don't continually train them. Again, I go back to my backyard. In my community, I believe in the state of California, I could be wrong, don't quote me. Teachers to enter into the career field must be CPR certified. In that CPR certification, they'd get CPR, AED training, and first aid training, basic first aid training. They are not, however, required to maintain that certification and follow along with the updates. Every 5 years, there are potential updates in CPR and first aid and so on and so forth, and that's when they come out every 5 years. So if you have a teacher, for example, my wife's been teaching for 15 years, she's over here, that's why I keep pointing that direction. If she's been teaching for 15 years and she was trained in CPR, she is approximately 3 updates behind. Now, she has me for a husband, so I've been teaching her, and we're good on that front for her. But for her colleagues, we're entering into that they don't know what to do phase, especially when training was years and years and years ago. So, although some school districts are carrying AEDs and Epi and stuff like that, it is common that they only have one person that maintains that equipment, and that person being the school nurse. In my school district, the school nurse is frequently at multiple campuses because they don't even have a school nurse per school. Again, I apologize for keeping this local, but my experience in the school realm, right, proper, is limited. All right, so that's obviously a problem. Wrong button. So we have a couple problems. In this case, in the event of a traumatic injury with uncontrolled hemorrhage, the victim has minutes to live. That is conservative in some places on the body. And then the response from fire and EMS is, well, that's even lower than the national average. The solution, schools for all ages need to have a robust Stop the Bleed program with AEDs strategically placed around the campus for expediency. A Stop the Bleed kit, which is rare in schools, should be able to be retrieved and to the victim's side in minutes. That means that if we have an outbuilding that is far away, that outbuilding needs to be equipped as well. And then training must be provided with those kits as well. On the second front, for sudden cardiac arrest, which is the leading cause of death in school-age children, causing 7,000 deaths a year, the solution is fairly evident, right? Again, some schools do have AEDs, but schools must have, for all ages, a robust AED program with AEDs strategically placed throughout the campus for expediency. And to increase the survivability of anyone under sudden cardiac arrest, this is within the school district, this is within your employment offices and things like that. The simple tool is an AED. A lot of times I hear, well, doesn't the ambulance have an AED? Yeah, they do. They're also minutes away. And if an AED is placed after 4 minutes, your chances of survival for that victim are extremely low. I may have jumped ahead. Oh, no, I didn't. All right. So it's through a three-pronged approach that I propose any school district, any place of employment, better prepare their schools for this environment, schools, and your administration. Did I jump ahead in my slides? Yeah, I did. All right, so there's three ways to better prepare. Obviously, training is primary, right? We can have the equipment, and if we don't know how to use it, does it really matter? So, like I stated before, if you have simple training, like computer-based training and what have you, love technology, all about technology. I'm using technology literally right now, right? But if you don't have a multi-sensory experience that is needed for proficiency, you're not going to get the same value as if you didn't, right? In addition to installing initial training, updates, refresher training must be planned in advance. If you're constantly cycling through employees, you need to get the information to the new guys. If you're constantly maintaining employees, which is ideal, those employees need refresher training or they're not going to maintain the information. I have on there that picture of the Ask an Expert, right? Any time that you're going through any of these types of trainings, it's ideal to find somebody who's lived it, been experienced in it, and what have you, and that's going to enhance your training as well. I was speaking with my wife as I prepared this, and she said a lot of teachers want to totally 100% shelf the idea of active shooter training, and some teachers love it and want more of it. It's an absolutely polarizing concept, and realistically, if you don't train, you are not going to know what to do. Equipment, there are a number of reputable equipment sources. They do need to implement those, as I previously stated, and that is going to be the biggest element. Training is one thing, but if you don't have the equipment as well, you're not going to be able to perform that. A lot of the techniques can be done without the equipment, but you're taking one responder, what I call an initial responder. You're taking one responder and you're tying them up with one victim or patient, and they're not able to be used in multiple capacities because their literal hands are tied up on that patient. And the third prong is my favorite, is mindset. Now, mindset is typical, right? So through a multisensory training along with multi-subject training that interlock, right? So if you take some different concepts like situational awareness, if you take concepts that help you with the actual physical actions that you need to take, right, during an active shooter, the lockdown procedures and so on and so forth, run, hide, fight, which is the FBI's program, along with the traumatic wound care, and you stick them all together in a cognitive pathway, for instance, a pre-threat, a mid-threat, and a post-threat, that helps mold the mindset of those against this type of training and helps provide training for all participants to better learn and facilitate change in their environment. Let's see what we got here. Now, you may be called to be an initial responder. I said that phrase earlier. I just mean first responders are essentially paid personnel that do this for a living, that train, and so on and so forth, but they are not located on your campus. And even if they are located on your campus, there's maybe other things to do. So if you are the one standing there with your hands in the air, yeah, you're the initial responder. So the question comes down to it is, do you have the training and do you have the equipment? Let me zoom through my notes real quick here. I'd encourage all the administration, educators, principals, everyone in board of directors and things like that, to push for further training. I know it's an uphill battle. I know funding is an issue. I know funding is a thing, and change doesn't happen overnight. That's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about conferences like this, is we're here advocating for change. We're here putting the bug in the ear of everyone that's listening everyone who's paying attention, and then you guys get to go home and facilitate change, whether it be in your workplace, whether it be in your school district, whether it be, what have you. We value the lives of our children, we value the lives of our staff, and we can show them by enhancing our understanding and increase their survivability as well as our own through these training, equipment, and mindset changes in our system. Even high school and junior high individuals can understand this training. We must be proactive, as I said already, and we can effectuate change. Oops, back one. There we go. Feel free to reach out with any inquiries. Like I said, if you were looking for the data that I used, I can certainly provide it to you via email, or you can catch me out when I'm done with this. At this point, did I make 25 minutes? Was I over? Was I under? Under? Oh, that's okay. Maybe I caught us up from when we were behind. I think they're working on it. It's on.
Hello, there we go. Thanks for this. This is, for me, kind of exciting stuff. I'm always trying to learn. So I run an organization called Nevada Outdoor School. So we have a little bit unique situation. First, we're in a rural area, and I mean very rural when I talk about Nevada. So we don't have as much risk as might happen in an urban area or even in a school-based program. I'm very concerned about this, and I'm trying to find resources to help me because we are unique. We're an outdoor school. We do things outdoors, right? So we don't have a campus to go hide in. It's just more of a unique situation, and we also don't have a camp facility, right? So we're out in remote areas. Do you have a protocol, a safety sort of thing that would help that sort of thing? Because like I said, I'm looking for models, but they're either schools or they're residential camp facilities, and that's just not what we're doing. What would you recommend? You mentioned like the run, hide, fight that the FBI uses. What would be your initial recommendations for that?
Yeah, so without knowing your specific campus and getting more, or how you operate, right? I'm going to give you an answer, and I'll do my best to hope that it works for what you're talking about, right? So there's a number of wilderness first aid programs that exist. I'm not currently an instructor of one, so I can't speak to their effectivity, but there are a number of programs. I would imagine that would fit what you're talking about as far as being in the outdoors and what have you. So your events are going to look a lot different if you ever have an event. It would be, and we can speak after. I see you're looking for a microphone. We can speak after, but yeah, as far as what kind of events you're going to end up with is going to be obviously dramatically different. Now, I will say this, take the active shooter aspect out of it, just the normal, outdoor first aid type stuff. You're in a unique situation where EMS is further away, right? So when you call 911, if you have service, again, I don't know your facility, if you have service and you call 911, they're not 5 minutes away, they're not 10 minutes away. Now we're looking at 20, 30 minutes away. So your protocols need to be dramatically different, for sure. Any other questions?
And thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. My question is, I guess that you talk about self-defense inside schools, but I feel that the problem is social. That means it requires some, to study the social root of the issue and to address that. Because I think school shooting is a social problem that needs to be understood socially and to be addressed socially as well. What do you think?
Yeah, so phenomenal question. You're 100% right. Gun violence in general, right, is a social problem. I own guns. I'm not saying guns are, bad and we shouldn't have guns. That's not my stance personally, right? And I'm not here to really debate or discuss that. But I will agree with any gun violence is a social issue. So this is what I believe is my stance, my take, or my position is you have a cart and a horse, and we don't know which one's which, and we don't know which one should come first, right? So we have to approach things multifacetedly. That's a word I just made up probably. So you have the social issue that we need to address, right? And that has a number of different solutions. But you have, in the meantime, or in the interim, before you solve that problem, you still have the gun violence. So you still have to do something about the gun violence in training and stuff like that while this other issue is being cleared up. Does that make sense? Does that help? I don't feel like you necessarily asked a question because that's way out of my purview to say like, oh, what should we do about the social issue of gun violence? But you're 100% right, there is an issue, whether it be in our schools, whether it be in our society, it's really a broad spectrum issue versus what we do about it in the interim. And that's what I'm proposing. We need to do something in the interim because even if gun violence were to disappear tomorrow, we still have it. We still have violence. It just becomes less fatal or initially fatal. Does that make sense? Does that help you?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to point out something that has never even crossed my mind that you had said, and we're talking about the gun violence, but you had said something about the cardiac, and that there was 7,000. That is an astounding number to me, and I think that's something really important that we take away and that I'm going to take back home to the school districts where my children go, or child actually, to say that's super important that we have that kind of training. So thank you for bringing that to light.
Thank you, ma'am. And if there's anything I could do to help you advocate for that, by all means, reach out.
Hey, Madison, great presentation, by the way.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
We spoke at lunch yesterday.
Yeah. Two quick questions. Number one, in terms of the training and refresher training, how often do you think school systems, districts, personnel, teachers, how often do you think they should be doing refresher training in medical or danger close situations? And the second question is, do you take a similar approach to a college campus that you would with an elementary, middle, or high school?
Great questions. So I'd like to see annually, right? CPR is a 2-year certification. I mean, that's a decent amount of time. I think the CPR is fairly common. So 2 years is a pretty good retention rate, just because we've seen it for a long, long time. These types of trainings are a little more intimate, a little more intricate, and so I would advocate for an annual training. And then the cool thing is if you miss your annual, you're going to get your 2-year anyway, right? So we missed, oops, and now we're at 2 years. 100%, I would say a similar approach for colleges, except for I would start integrating the students, maybe even into high school, where you really get that knowledge to the student. I think we were talking about yesterday. If not, I talk about this all the time, so I get confused as to who I was talking to sometimes. I mentioned very, very briefly a pre-threat concept, right? So one of the things that I'm pushing right now within my business is situational awareness training, right? Situational awareness, it's literally in the name. I'm sure you can figure it out. It's not a complicated concept on the surface, but as you dive into it, there's a lot to it, right? And so bringing it back into the college realm, one of the things that I think is important, especially for new people going to college, I remember when I first went to college, I only went for a very brief time, but it's a different world, right? The campus is much larger. You have responsibility to be all the way across campus, in a shortened time and things like that. And you got free periods and studying, and then there's like all kinds of social things that are going on and things like that. So what would be beneficial in a college realm especially, or post-high school realm, whether it be tech schools, junior college, all the way to major campuses. What I think would be beneficial, especially to incoming students, is a situational awareness training where you now have an army of people looking for threats. And we did talk about this, now that I remember. We talked about the bad guys don't act when the cops are there, right? It's not like they're like, don't see the cops because they camouflage into the background. Like, the point of law enforcement is to establish a presence. If they're around, less crime happens. And I'm just talking about on a broad spectrum. So what that means is the crime isn't happening right in front of the cops. The crime is happening across campus or somewhere wherever they're not. So if you give the power to the students, anyone who's willing, right? It's not going to be mandatory or anything like that. That would be a pipe dream. And they wouldn't learn anything anyway. But if you give the ones that are into it, then they can be an army of aware troops looking at, why is that guy acting weird? Why does that bag look like a gun, shaped like a gun, or what have you, right? Why are these people over here acting sketchy and things like that? So there's that element too. So from a pre-threat all the way through, traumatic wound care, college students, even high school students can start grasping those concepts pretty easily. It's just a matter of implementation. So yes, I would definitely agree with a similar or same approach with an extension to give you the shortest possible answer on that. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you very much.